Welcome to another edition of Fouts Forum. I'm Mayor Jim Fouts. Today, I have someone that I personally have admired and followed his career for some time, Denny McClain. Denny McClain is the star pitcher for the Detroit Tigers in the 1960s, and I want to know from a personal point of view, I have known Denny for at least a decade or more, maybe two decades, because Denny used to have a talk show on WXYT radio, in my opinion, one of the best talk radio shows, period. And he would have me on his show from time to talk about what was going on in the Warren City Council meeting. And Denny, whether it was interviewing myself or interviewing a number of people, was by far the preeminent, if not the best, interviewer in, I think, radio history, and someone who will be a fascinating interview today. Now, to give you a little background about Denny McClain, Denny received the Cy Young Award for being the best pitcher in the American League 2 years in a row in '68 and '69. That is quite an achievement. In addition, in 1968, Denny won 31 games, the first pitcher to achieve that in over 30 years. Not only did Denny win the Cy Young Award, but he was also named the most valuable player in the American League in 1968. 1968 is probably my favorite year for the Tigers, although I enjoyed 67 also. But it was the year the Tigers won the World Series with Denny and Mickey Lolich leading the pitching staff. Denny, welcome to Fouts Forum. Could you go into more detail about your baseball career? I understand that you started out with the Chicago White Sox then, and what? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your early career?
I'm born and raised in Chicago. Okay. Went to Mount Carmel High School in Chicago, which is a very famous high school. Matter of fact, the rumor is they've got like almost, you won't believe this, but somewhere between $1 and $2 billion trust fund at Mount Carmel High School. This is a very serious school, been a long time a serious school. A lot of All-Americans, a lot of great students. I mean, they have promoted and secured their place in history as far as it goes, producing men. Now of course, women now go to the school too. But the bottom line is it's been one of those schools, been kind of a step, it's been next step to Notre Dame is what it's really been used for. Anyway, so when I got out of high school, I graduated, I think, June 10th, 1962. And that afternoon, a couple of guys in Cadillacs pulled up to the house to see me and my mom. My dad had died when I was 13. And so my mother and I and an uncle were interviewing these general managers and scouting directors for these teams, the Yankees, the Milwaukee Braves at the time, and of course the Chicago White Sox. And the first guys who walked in were the New York Yankees, or the Milwaukee Braves. They were in and out in about 5 minutes. Had offered us $1,000 to sign, and my mother.
So that was the bonus for an outstanding player.
Well, that was the offer, and
yeah.
My mother said, "Absolutely not. You got to come up with a lot more money." Now, keep this in mind: we barely had money to buy milk. So,
but your mother was a good negotiator, I think.
She became a good one that day, I'll tell you. And the next one of the guys that walked in were the New York Yankees, drives up in a brand new Cadillac, beautiful blue, I'll never forget the beautiful blue suit, beautiful tie, just looked perfect, and he offered us $17,500 to sign. And when he turned when he sat back in a chair and took his one leg and bent it over the other leg, he had a hole in his shoe like this, that big. Well, my mother, who was born and raised in Poland, just didn't like that at first. And she said, I forget the guy's name, Kerr, I think. And she said, "Mr. Kerr, we thank you very much." And he said, "Well, I've got a check here. It's a good check. You can take it, Mrs. McClain, and take it right to the bank tomorrow morning. It was a Sunday. And you can get as much money out of it as you want." And my mother said, "We want to think about this, Mr. Kerr." I said, "Can you give us one more day?" And he said, "By all means, what time do you want me to call you tomorrow?" And she said, "Call us about 10 o'clock and we'll have an answer for you." And he said, "Now listen, if it's money, we can talk about possibly more." And my mother said, "Well, we may talk about that, but there's another issue that I want to talk to Dennis about." And she never called me Denny, it was always Dennis. So the next guys that drove up an hour later were the Chicago White Sox. The farm director was there, the general manager of the White Sox was there, and their head scout. So they brought the big guns out, right? And plus, I had a pretty good reputation in the city of Chicago, Mount Carmel High School and everything. So they had the same offer for me, $17,500, all dressed in nice shirts and ties. Nellie Fox was there, by the way, one of the great Hall of Famers.
Great Chicago White Sox
there were four guys there. So the next thing, my mother, between the two visits, my mother said to me, I said, "Mom, why didn't you take the 17? Are you crazy?" I said, "It's $17,500. My God, we can retire. I don't have to go play ball. We just take the money, go have a good time."
By the way, I should just stop a minute and say people at the time if you made $10,000 a year, that was a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And the average person was making what, 4,000 or 5,000?
5,000, 6,000 at the most. Yep.
Yeah.
If you were making $100 a week, you're making a lot of money back then. So anyway, the White Sox walk in. They all sit around in the living room. We didn't have a table for anybody to sit around, so we 6, 7 of us in the living room, including my uncle. My uncle, by the way, was a Chicago cop. He weighed about 450 pounds. You know, when he was in his uniform with his gun. I mean, the gun was almost as big as he was, but in the 450 pounds, 6'6", that's an imposing individual, right? So, and Bob says, well, gentlemen, what is your offer for my nephew? So we have $17,500 for him. We're ready to put him on a plane tonight. He'll be in Harlan, Kentucky tomorrow. And all I said was, where the hell is Harlan, Kentucky? And he said, well, it's south of Chicago. That's all they told me. Yeah. So the next thing we talk for about 10 or 15 minutes. My mother's asked all the poignant questions, and then finally my mother says, give us the check, give us the contract, we'll sign right now. So we took the $17,500, shook hands, everybody hugged each other, and they said, now in 4 hours you got to be at O'Hare Airport to fly out of there. And never been on a plane before. I did not know where O'Hare was. I didn't know anything about that side of Chicago. So the next thing that happens is the Yankee scouts, or the White Sox scouts leave, Nellie Fox and everything. I made sure I got Nellie Fox's autograph before I walked out the door. And the next thing I know is I said, Mom, it's the same money. Are you kidding? It was the same money. I said, Mickey Mantle, my idol. That's my guy.
You could play with Mickey
I could have played with Mickey Mantle. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
She said, listen to me. And you listen to me all the time. Now remember, she's from Poland.
Yeah.
She says, did you see his shoes? I says, yeah, beautiful suit, nice shoes, nice everything. She says, did you see the bottom of his shoes? I says, yeah. What do you mean, though? She says, he had a hole in there the size of 3/4. Are you going to take a check from somebody for $17,500 when the guy can't afford a new pair of shoes? And that was her argument for turning down the Yankees. Yeah. So that's how I wound up with the White Sox. They shipped me off to Harlan, Kentucky, which was a little bit of hell at the time, because when I got on the plane that night, never been on a plane in my life. I mean, I almost all of my body parts were jumping all over.
And that's before ISIS and all the things today.
Oh yeah, that was nothing. But it was scary as hell because I'd never been on a plane before. In fact, that was the first day in my life I fell in love with aviation. Of course, later owned airplanes and things like that.
Planes.
Right. So anyway, we got to Harlan, Kentucky, and the first guy I meet in Harlan, Kentucky. Now I get there at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And the guy sitting on the front porch is sitting in front of a spittoon about 5 feet away from him. Big, long beard. You know that guy you see in all the commercials, right? And he's going, ping, and he'd hit that spittoon. Ping, and he'd hit that spittoon. And he's got a hound dog with the great big ears.
Or he's just like him, right?
Just like him. So and I'm about 5 feet from him, and I said, sir, can you tell me where the front desk is? Yep, I sure can. Sir, where? I sure can. I said, I don't know what that means. I sure can. I said, can you tell me where the front desk is? Yes, sir. I says, where? He says, upstairs. I said, where is upstairs? Ping, ping. I said, sir, please, tell me, please. Upstairs, about 5 floors. And I grabbed my 2 bags and I said, where's the elevator? Elevator? We don't have elevators in Kentucky. Are you kidding? That's 5 floors. It's 110 degrees in the shade.
Oh,
I'm telling you, it's so hot you can't imagine.
And then you're traveling up in this heat and all.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I get all the way up to the 5th floor, and then they tell me, well, yes, this is the front desk, but for you players, you got to go down to 3 now so you can get checked in. So
great.
It took me an hour and a half to find my room. No cold water, no hot water, no water at all. And it was trials and tribulations. The good news is the first time I pitched 5 days later, I threw a no-hitter. Wow. First game out of the box.
Fantastic.
So I threw a no-hitter, struck out 16, walked, I think, like 48 guys. And the next thing I know is I'm pitching again in 4 days. I go out and lose 1-0, give up 1 hit. And the greatest news of my life, and I'm telling you, at that point in time, it was the best news I've ever had in my life. They said, listen, we're getting you out of here. You're too good for this league. You're overmatched in this league. We're sending you to Iowa. Well, now that's 3 hours from my home and my girlfriend, right? Yeah. And I got $17,500 in the bank. So actually I didn't, because my mother took most of the $17,500, which was fine. Is that
Sharon, by the way?
Sharon, that's right. That's my baby. So the bottom line is I go to Iowa and, of course, finished the summer there, went to winter ball, and then Sharon and I started more seriously about getting married. And we did the following year. We both got married at the age of 19, had 4 great kids. We've got 7 grandkids today. We've been married now 52 years.
Wow, congratulations.
I don't know how I put up with her for 52 years. But, you know, these women's hormones, they're tough to deal with. They are extremely difficult to deal with every day. Tough.
All right, so tell us this. how did you jump from Chicago to the Detroit Tigers? How did that take place?
What happened was I was having a real good.
How did the Tigers luck out getting you? And
what happened is
caused the White Sox to lose
and
you?
it was much more lucky for me than it was them. What happened is there was a crazy rule back then. You could only have 27 players on your major league roster that you signed that year. In other words, that included the big club. So you had 25 there, and you could only keep 2 out of anybody else you signed that year. Well, there were 2 other guys, Dave DeBusschere,
great basketball player,
and could throw the ball through a wall. The problem
I
was,
forgot that DeBusschere was a baseball player.
Oh man,
too.
he could throw the ball through a wall. But his problem was it was as straight and as flat as his table. The ball never moved, and every time he'd throw a real good fastball, unless he had it in a good place, they'd hit it 9 miles. So David was one of those, and they said he threw the ball back then at 95 miles an hour. Wow. Then there was another guy, Bruce Howard, who was in his 3rd year in college, had a little bit of a breaking ball, could throw strikes, good pitcher, really a solid pitcher. Probably out of the 3 of us, probably the better pitcher. And here's me at 18 years old. I didn't have a curveball, didn't have a slider, just a fastball. So and I hadn't given up a run all spring training, and we're in the last 2 weeks of spring training just before my birthday. Al Lopez was the manager, one of the great managers, as they say, of all time.
Right?
A legend at that point. I have an opinion of him different. But the bottom line is he sends me out to pitch in Mexico City. We went over to Mexico City for a 3-day exhibition in Mexico City.
Was that in the summer?
No, this is spring training in 1963.
Was it hot then in Mexico?
Oh, tell me it was hot. And the bottom line there was that I pitched 6 innings over there, 18 up and 18 down, had 3 perfect innings, and we get on the plane, and I'm all high, right? I mean, I'm super. I mean, I know I'm going to be with the Chicago White Sox now, right? And by the way, I hated the White Sox. I'm a big Cub fan. Okay. So the only downside was I'm with the White Sox and not the Cubs. Thank God I went with somewhere else.
The Cubs still haven't won. So.
Cubs still suck. Yeah. So I get on the plane, sitting in the back of the plane with Bruce Howard and Dave DeBusschere. The 3 of us are sitting there playing cards. And next thing I know, Al Lopez sends the flight attendant back, a stewardess in those days, sends the stewardess down and says, tell Denny to come up here, I want to talk to him. So I go up there, he's sitting in first class, of course, and I said, yes, sir, Mr. Lopez. He said, we got something going on here, and we got a problem. He said, you did real well in Mexico City. You've had a great spring training, but you have no curveball. You really don't have no slider at all, no changeup. What do I do, take you to the big leagues with just a fastball? I said, well, if I'm getting them out, that would help. I said, I can't believe da-da-da. So he said, well, this is what we're going to do. He said, you and Bruce Howard are going to pitch against each other. They had to keep DeBusschere because he would gotten $60,000 that year as a bonus. So they're not giving away a guy making 60 plus his salary. So
that was a lot of money.
A ton of money, 60,000. It's still a ton of money.
Yeah.
You know. So DeBusschere gets to sit there and watch this game on Saturday, and the loser is going to be put on waivers. The loser goes on waivers.
That's horrible. That's horrendous.
Well, let me tell you what happens. The first pitch of the game, I don't know if you remember the name of Dave Nicholson. Dave Nicholson was one of the great power hitters in the American League in the early 60s, middle 60s, and could hit a ball farther than any human being, I think, at that time in baseball. And the first pitch of the game, they put Nicholson up first in the batting order because this was kind of an exhibition for these guys who were playing against us too, right? Howard's on one team, I'm on the other team. First pitch of the ball game, I give up a home run to Nicholson that went 7 miles. I'm telling you, the ball didn't come down till it got to Orlando. Yeah. So 9 innings later, I got beat 1-0, gave up 2 hits all day, but I got beat 1-0. Within an hour after the ball game, Lopez had come up to me and said, I'm sorry, good luck to you.
Wow.
And I said, that's it? He said, well, what else do you want me to say? He said, we already know there's 3 or 4 clubs that made bids for you before this ball game. And he said, so somebody's going to pick you up right away. He said, I don't know who, but somebody will pick you up right away. 20
that
minutes.
had to have been a little devastating.
Oh, it was devastating. Listen, I called Sharon to begin with, and I said, listen, I'm being traded or put on waivers or some kind of a wire. I said, I don't understand it. Remember now, her father was Lou Boudreau.
You should mention Lou Boudreau was a legend, a coaching legend.
Still
right?
a legend in Cleveland. Yeah, still a legend in Cleveland. And one of the great.
He was one of the great coaching legends of all time. And you liked him, right?
Hall of Fame shortstop, Hall of Fame, and a Hall of Fame father-in-law. Yeah. The best father-in-law you could ever have. And I called home Sharon, and back in those days, you couldn't put quarters in all the time because we were only making a couple $100s a month. And so I called Sharon collect because Lou had a lot of money, and I thought he did anyway. And the bottom line is, I got on the phone with Sharon. I said, listen, I'm going to come home. I'm going to do what my dad did or do what my uncle did. I'm either going to become a cop or I'm going to work in the Buda factory. I said, I'm not going to do this. This is wrenching. I said, if I can't play with Chicago, who the hell do I really want to play with? And Sharon said to me, as strong as I could sit in this room today, if you come home, don't call me. She said, if you can't stick in there better than this, don't call me.
What a great wife.
What a great wife.
What a great wife.
So the next thing I know, the Detroit Tigers pull up, and in the car is a guy named Ed Catalinus, who was the head scout, and two other guys, Vince Desmond and Mr. Al Kaline.
Really?
So
Al Kaline?
Al came down with them to pick me up, so I was really impressed with the whole thing. So they took me back to Tiger Town.
I have to ask you, curiosity, what did Al Kaline say? What
Congratulations, welcome to the Detroit Tigers, and you're going to love it here. He says, if you can throw strikes, we'll score you some runs. You know, obviously every pitcher needs runs. You can't win 1-0 every night. So that's the way my introduction was. That's the way I joined the club, and I spent a couple of weeks in Tiger Town. I went up to Duluth, Minnesota from there, won a whole bunch of ball games up there. They kept moving me up that year, and within from the time I got to the Tigers in
within 1 year, right?
Oh yeah, I was in the major leagues within 12
62 to
months.
63,
62. I was in the major leagues in September of '63. Yeah, I got lucky, really lucky. Plus the timing was good. They had a lot of older guys that had either hurt themselves or couldn't get anybody out anymore. So the timing, myself, Joe Sparma, Lolich, we all came within the same year of each other.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we all came within the same year of each other. Bill Freehan, Dick McCullough.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of somebody else. Mickey Stanley, Gates Brown.
So you were all within a couple years
all
of each
at
other.
the same, all within a 1 or 2 year period of time. We all got to the club at the same time.
All right, Denny, you won 131 games in your career.
I think so.
Of all the games that you won, which one stood out the most? I'm going to guess it was your win in the World Series in '68, but...
Well, that was certainly a big moment because I had got shut out by Gibson in the first game. He struck out 17 guys. I mean, God wouldn't have been.
Or was it your 30th win?
No.
31 win.
The game that I'm the most proud of, let me put it that way, the game I was most proud of is I was in a 1-0 game with the Cleveland Indians and with Tiant, and it was the first time I ever won a major league game 1-0. That's a big moment for a pitcher to go 9 and win 1-0.
You won the whole thing. The players didn't do anything.
The whole thing. And Don Demeter, you may remember the name.
Yeah,
Don
I do
Demeter.
remember him.
Donnie hit a home run to win it for me in the bottom of the seventh. I pitched 9 innings, struck out 16 guys, I think. It was the definition of what a pitcher can do if he was really right. I mean, and I could have pitched all night and it would have been the same result. So my point is, that's the proudest moment I ever had as a pitcher. The proudest moment I ever had as a player for the Tigers was the night we won the pennant. That was some night. They talk about the World Series and winning of it. That was anticlimactic as far as most of the guys were concerned, because what had happened in '67, we had 40 people get killed, we had these riots, we had terrible, terrible actions and conduct and events in the metro area, all of the threats and the warnings that were going out. I mean, it's much like we've heard the last week or two around the world. It was nasty, but the bottom line was we won it. Black, white, green, yellow, purple, pink, I don't care what you are, you hugged and kissed, you celebrated, you had a great time, and we haven't had one of those in a long time.
I would just add that obviously I was around like you were then, and I remember that was the key defining moment in Detroit history, at least in the interim. Unfortunately, it didn't end up where black and white and everybody was united and everybody was excited. But I got to tell you, I'm going to just have you mention it in a minute. I loved the '67 game. I remember listening to radio, and if you had beat Boston, you would have won the American League Championship, and it boiled down to that one game.
Yeah, I think
I remember listening to radio and even screaming at the radio.
And I think it was the Angels, wasn't it? The Angels or
the
whatever
Angels,
team.
right.
I think it was the
You
Angels.
were-
but let me tell
Boston
you,
got it,
right?
right?
And let me tell you, the Boston guys, the guy that beat us. What happened was I was out the entire month of September. I injured my foot, and of course that's another story. But injured my foot. I was out for 4.5 weeks. I couldn't pitch. And just think about it. We lose the season by a half a game.
Yeah.
All I got to do is win one game in 4.5 weeks.
Yeah.
I'd already won 17 going into September. So you know I got to win one.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I couldn't pitch. I went out there and tried to pitch the last game and got through about an inning and a third. I just couldn't land on my foot.
But
it's the same foot I broke a couple of months ago.
But the fans were geared up and everybody was geared up for '68. '68, Now, tell me if I'm wrong. I believe the Tigers won 9 in a row, but the first game you lost, right? Wasn't that it?
No, I didn't lose.
You didn't lose,
Right,
but the
right.
Tigers lost.
We may have
but
lost.
you ended up winning a lot of games.
Yeah, what happened, excuse me, what happened was the first 3 games I pitched that year, I did not get a decision. People don't know that. Think about this now. The first, still win 30 ball games, but the first 3 games, we don't get a decision. I think I went 0-0, 1-1, and 2-2. I think that's what the scores were. But no decision did I get in any of them. And then we still had 38 starts led at that point in time, and then we went on the tear.
And by the way, I want to add some things to our audience, to younger people or younger than Denny and I, and that's a lot of people. But I think few people are aware of the fact that the rotation is different today than it was then. It's going to be, in my opinion, you agree or disagree, but pitchers don't pitch as long as you do. They usually don't they only go till about the 7th inning, and they don't have the rotation. It's 1 of 5 rather than 1 of 4.
And they don't pitch as much as they should pitch. You know, they're trying to get these kids to throw 100 pitches every 5th day. Now let me ask you something. Wouldn't it make more sense to get them out there more often and throw 100 pitches every 4th day instead of 5th day? Let them have an extra 5 to 7, 8 starts a year. Doesn't that make more sense mechanically, mentally, to get you out there more and more? We used to throw every day. We threw every day. Now, we didn't go out there and bust the ball every day, but if I'd pitch on a Sunday, Monday I'd throw for 5 or 6 minutes just to make sure.
Well, and I want to add 2 things that people may not be aware of. You had to be part of the hitting lineup too.
Yeah,
right?
we hit too. Yeah.
Pitchers don't hit anymore, right?
Well, I like the idea that you think I hit, but
you hit a home run, didn't you?
Oh, I hit a home run in my first major league at bat.
That's what I remember. And also,
and by the way, that was the last one.
Was that the last one? Also, pitchers don't go more than 7 innings. You went full 9 innings. They even pull them out before that. So instead of a rotation of 1 of 4, it's 1 of 5. And instead of going
Sometimes
to full
6.
9 innings, it's 7. And you were part of the batting lineup. Remember?
Yeah, all the pitchers, of course, hit 9th, but they're trying to take better care of these kids, which obviously wouldn't take much to take better care of them. But they're.
Well, come on, Denny. Let's say one thing for the record. You were one of the most outstanding pitchers in the history of the American League. What's the most you made in a year?
The biggest salary I ever had in 1 year was $90,000.
$90,000, and of course Al Kaline turned down a $100,000.
Yeah, but let's get that started.
Well, yeah, I know, but let me just make
the
point that I want to make is that we had superstars making small amounts of money, and today they make millions and millions of dollars, and average players are making more than you did in your probably
the average major league player.
300,000?
Oh no! Major league minimum is 500,000.
Oh, okay.
Now, in my 10-year career, my entire 10 years, I made 440,000.
Wow!
In
That's
10 years,
total.
That's under the major league minimum for a player today. Guy walks on the field today, he makes a minimum of 500,000.
And let me also say this: Denny had more competition because there were only 8 teams in the American League, 8 teams in the National League, and today how many teams are there? There's got to be
32.
Twice as many.
We have 32 teams.
32, so the talent is spread out.
Well, here's the big difference too. Most of the major league clubs.
It's easier to make a professional team today than when you.
Oh, sure, because you got more slots. Yeah. But here's the key too. Back in those days, when we only had 8 teams, of course they went to 10 a year or 2 later after I got to the big leagues, but when they had the 8 teams, they had anywhere from 8 to 15 or 16 minor league teams. Now they've got hundreds of players in the minor leagues, and you got all of those guys fighting for a job for the big leagues. So your competition was much more intense back then too. You had all of these guys that wanted to be in the big leagues. And I've always told every kid that I've ever talked to and every parent, it's one thing to be a good pitcher or a good player. It's another thing to get to the major leagues. But when you get there, if you think you've worked hard to get there, you better find out how hard it's going to be once you get there. Because you've got 24 guys on your team who were all All-Stars last year who want your job. They want your job, so you better bust your butt every day. And then you've got the rest of the league, 31 other teams. All of those guys are All-Stars, and all they care is who can I play with in the major leagues next year. And I don't care who it is. I want to be in the big leagues. So your job is always in jeopardy.
Let me ask you this. How tough do you think it'll be for someone to win 30 games like you did?
No, they can't do it. I mean,
it's impossible because of the lineup.
They don't. Number one, they don't get enough starts. If they pass gas the wrong way, they keep them out for a start or two. I mean, they're scared to death if somebody makes a mistake.
All right. Second issue, drugs. you had, and I can't think of the players, but you had players who are obviously bulked up.
With the juice.
And who am I thinking of? There's several of them. Bulked
McGuire, you know, I can name 100 of them.
And these guys end up being...
Bonds changed.
Here's
Bonds
what makes
became
me
two
mad.
heads.
They break records, but as far as I'm concerned, dishonesty.
Sure.
They did it with drug enhancement. So players like you and Mantle and whoever it is that fair to them? Because they didn't use the drugs. And shouldn't there be an asterisk next to their name saying that they won this, but with the enhancement
You know,
of
I don't know
drugs?
how you handle that. I have no idea. What I've always said was the records are all meant to be broken one way or the other. But if you take a look at the conditions that, and by the way, our conditions were not that bad. There's still the major leagues. They still carried your bags. They still packed your bags. They did everything you needed in your life.
Well, you didn't have
the
steroids available then.
No, we didn't have any of that. But now, listen, there's probably some marijuana around and stuff like that. But to my knowledge, I never saw.
My point is they had drug enhancement to break these records.
Yeah, they had
and
the
to
juice.
me, that's wrong.
They had the juice.
It was dishonesty.
They had the juice. But the reason why, see, people don't understand why they took the drugs.
Yeah.
They took the drugs, not necessarily, yes, to bulk up, no question about it, and they assumed that it made them bigger and quicker. It certainly made them bigger. But the reason why a lot of the pitchers took the drug is because these juice drugs were drugs that allowed them to recover quickly when they got hurt.
Okay.
Now, the problem was if they recovered quickly and they felt good, they'd go out there before they were really completely 100% ready, and they'd go out and hurt themselves again. And at that point in time, they're done. You know, a pitcher can't recover 2 times, 3 times, 4 times.
Let me ask you this. This is going a little bit off track where we're on. This is a little note that I jotted down before I had you come in. You are the preeminent player amongst baseball, especially baseball in Detroit, in terms of just being a personality, maybe being a little bit of a character, maybe being a little bit of controversy, but also larger than life. Would you agree, here's some of the people that I came up with that were kind of equivalent to you, and I don't know if you knew him, but what about Alex Karras? Would you not say he would fit into your persona a little bit? He was larger than life. I remember the famous fight he had at the Lindell AC between the, who was it, the wrestler, what was his name?
I can't think of his name, but...
At any rate, I don't know, did you ever meet Alex?
Oh, yeah, sure. I met Alex a lot.
Would you agree you and Alex were a little bit alike?
Alex
was controversial.
But not really.
No?
Alex was very entertaining in his own circles.
Yeah.
Alex wouldn't say much if he had a mouthful of it. Alex was really a private kind of guy.
Pretty intelligent guy, I'm
Very
assuming.
intelligent guy. But he kind of kept his mouth shut. He always had a great time in the clubhouse. He had a great time when he came around the Tiger games. He had a great time when we did radio and TV together. But he wasn't the kind of guy that went out front to promote anything.
Okay.
So once he got into the movies, when he really made his money and his character.
And then he had, what was it, Webster?
Then he had the Webster Show, yeah. I mean, he really hit a great role there towards the last 30, 40 years
Was
of his life.
he genuine?
Genuine, good guy.
Yeah,
Just a terrific guy.
All right, what about...
He was what you saw.
Bobby Lane, maybe he's before your time.
Before me. I met Bobby one time.
He was controversial in his own way.
At a minimum, he was controversial.
I understand he would drink and play. I don't know if that was true.
If all the rumors are true, and Bonds used to tell some stories about him that, listen, he would start drinking on Wednesday just to get a level playing field by Sunday so he could play, because he wanted to stay drunk as long as he can. And once he got used to being drunk, then he could play.
Here's another thing I'm going to say.
That was a joke. But
yeah, okay. I didn't know for sure.
I'll slow down.
Here's another thing that I noticed about your generation of players and the ones today. Back in the time, fans could go and see you in the bar and you'd sit down and chat with them.
Absolutely.
And you were also players reps, right?
Absolutely.
You guys had another job. You had to be a
Oh, you
players
bet you're
rep
bippy.
and so on and so forth, whether it be K-Line or you or
Made no
Alex
difference.
Karras. Today, they make so much money that they don't have time for the fans.
They work out all the time.
They're roped off. You
Yep.
can't talk
Can't
with
touch
them.
'em.
You can't be pals. There's no such thing as the Lindell AC where players go.
You're right.
You agree with that?
I
so
totally
the players
agree.
have grown more distance from the fan as the player financial income has gone up.
Tremendous.
The distance is not there. Do you think that's a bad thing, or do you think
Well,
that's just
I think what happens with the players, and I've been saying this for a long time, The players forget who supports them and the team. They forget that
they don't have time for the fans.
They don't have time. They want to go home and count their checkbook. Yeah. They want to see what checks cleared today, what debits in their card cleared today. And the problem is they have forgotten once they achieve some success, and now they're making $3-4 million a year at a minimum. Yeah. The bottom line is they don't have time for autographs. Now, before they became a little bit of a star, they would go out and do a card show for a couple $1,000s. Yeah. Now a guy who's in the big leagues...
Or autograph signing.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So when a guy now in the big leagues 3-4 years, all of a sudden the promoter says, how much do you want for the show? And he'll say $25,000. The promoter will say, okay, I'll give it to you in cash. Yeah. So, I mean, the money has lost its definition. The money is just another commodity they put in their pants. I mean, I've seen guys in the clubhouse walking around with 20, 25 grand in cash. In cash! Yeah. I mean, listen, we'd all like to carry a lot of cash with us, but the bottom line is you don't do that to impress the media, to impress some woman in the clubhouse that you're trying to get close to, and that goes on all the time. But the bottom line is they're not allowed in their own mind to converse and to mingle with the fans, the people who pay them damn tickets, those $100 tickets, those $200 tickets. So nobody's taking care of the fans.
So the sport has lost a lot in terms of the average fan.
Yeah, but there's another reason too, Jim. Yeah. And that other reason is these guys don't stay. You know, they're here for a year or two, and boom, they're in Toronto, they're in Texas, they're in Atlanta.
Actually, you've got a good point. You were with the Tigers for how many years?
8.5.
Almost 9 years. Kaline was with the Tigers for what?
Forever, 100 years.
Yeah, you know,
he's
that
still
kind
there.
Of thing. So you don't have the hometown team. So it's almost like rent a star.
You know what it is? I define it as this. Al Kaline is Detroit. You can't say that.
Alex Karras, not Alex. Well, I was
Alex
thinking
Karras could be too, right?
Mr. Hockey.
Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe. Yeah. He is Detroit. Yeah. All of us who stayed here for a long time, and what I talk about staying a long time, we got married here. We had our children here. We've had our grandchildren here. We are Michigan. We are Michigan. And unfortunately, that's not what's going on today. They come in town, by the way, and they spend a lot of money, and they buy big houses, if not mansions. But the year that they get traded or the year that they leave,
they're gone.
They're gone. So is that house.
Out of sight and out of mind. Let me mention some people that you and I talked about earlier, and I want you to talk your personal recollections. Ted Williams was your manager after being traded to the Washington Senators in 1970. What do you remember about him? I mean, he's kind of a legend in my mind. I remember reading where my parents told me during World War II, he was batting .400, and then he was drafted, went off to World War II. This guy could have...
Well, he really was. He wasn't drafted either.
Oh, he volunteered.
He volunteered. Yeah. Not once. That much. Not once. Twice.
Korean War or what?
World War II and the Korean War. Wow. He volunteered for both missions, and it was a pilot. Yeah. And so you take...
He lost a lot of money and lost a lot of record, right?
Listen...
Wasn't he the last one to bat over .400?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. But the thing about Ted, and I played for him, he wasn't my favorite manager. He wasn't a guy that really took a great care in managing a ball team. But he was an American hero by every sense of every definition. He was a great man. I'm telling you, he was a great man. And if you read his biography, and you read a biography written by somebody else, it does him justice. His own biography does not do him the justice that he deserves. Here's a guy making whatever amount of money, and certainly not making the kind of money to make him.
He didn't make big money either, did he?
He made pretty good money. Probably
as a
averaged
manager,
100.
But not as
no, as a player, he probably made 100 grand a year.
All right.
Because that's how good he was. He put butts in the seats. Is what. And Bob Feller, what a great American hero. Bob also left and go fly in 2 wars. Bob was a monster hero too. And Bob never got the due that he deserved either. In Cleveland he did, where he played, of course. Yeah. But Bob was one of those guys, if he believed in something, and Bob was very opinionated, I mean like Attila the Hun. Yeah. When he got into a subject and he loved it, don't even try to argue with him, because he was either going to throw a fastball and knock you down on your butt, or he was going to hit you, one way or the other, because he was going to win the argument. That was his intensity. Also, he was one of the strongest, and we all are strong. We support our country. Every one of us do. We have the greatest ability in the world. We can talk about our governments. We can chastise our governments and not have any issues, right? Bob Feller was the kind of guy that no matter what the government did, Bob would back him up. That's the kind of guy he was. He was a team player, and he was going to always be a team player. I can't imagine Bob Feller today, with what's happened in our country the last couple of weeks and in France and what have you, I can't imagine what Bob Feller would be screaming about today. I can think of a few of the adjectives he'd be using, but and he would have a different principle and application than any of us really wanted to talk about.
All right, let's go to some other people you knew. Mickey Mantle. Obviously, there was the controversial home run ball in 1968, and I believe you were cited by the commissioner for what you did. But talk about Mickey Mantle. Tell us some stories about him and what you did. Obviously, you threw him a free. You threw him a free. What did you say? You had somebody tell him they're going to throw fastballs. Was that it?
Something like that. And after about
this was his last game.
This was his last game in Tiger Stadium.
He was 36 years old, I think.
I don't know how old he was, but Mickey was. He needed one more home run to go by Jimmy Fox, and we were winning 6-1, 6-2, whatever the score was. So 2 outs, ninth inning, no big deal. And he finally hit the home run in the upper deck. He goes by first base, second base, third base.
Took his hat off.
Took his hat off to me, and that's what started the problem. And then the next thing I know, 3 days later, after all of the controversy had calmed down and all the articles were written, well, we think McClain really grooved it, and I wasn't talking. So the next thing that happens is I get a registered letter from the commissioner's office, General Eckert. And General Eckert said, "It has come to my attention that you may have attempted to determine the outcome of a baseball game."
Oh, for Christ's sake.
And that's how it started. And that investigation went on until he died. And as soon as the investigation, as soon as he died, the investigation was over with, because it was really, I mean, BS. Yes, I threw the pitch, but folks, here's the bottom line to the whole thing. He still had to hit it. It's not, you grab a bat and you go in a cage and see how far you can hit that ball.
Man, he hit it.
He hit it. This was a serious home run. He hit it about 400 feet, they say, and off the facade in right field. I mean, listen, and on top of that, regardless of the home run, it was my idol. I mean, when I was 12 years old, by the way, I was a multimillionaire. I don't know if you know that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, my front wheel of my Schwinn bike, my 3-speed, had 60 Mickey Mantle rookie cards. And my back wheel had 60 baseball cards of L. Kaline and Mickey Cochran. I was worth millions of dollars.
Do you still have those cards?
No, because we had no collection business back then. There was no memorabilia business. But
I remember collecting those baseball cards.
Oh yeah,
too.
Listen, I did too, because you'd hear Denny McClain coming with that Schwinn all the way down to brrrr, you know. But here's the bottom line: the day that I signed, remember now, with my mom, my little Polish mother. She puts me on the plane that afternoon, and the next morning at 8 o'clock, she said, she went back to the house, took my zillions of baseball cards, and threw them all in the dumpster.
Oh, my Lord.
I mean, I didn't even have a chance to hold on to them.
Oh, your mother was quite a character.
Oh, she was. She was a beauty.
Al Kaline.
Mr. Tiger. I don't think there's any way of saying it any other way. Al was the absolute definition of a Detroit Tigers. You know, he's been here all of his life. When he left Baltimore, he never looked back. He never thought about going to another club. He never asked to go to another club, despite the fact in '67 of the winters.
Well, he was young like you. Was he 17 or 18?
When he came to the big leagues. And after 1967, when we lost the pennant by a half a game, Jim Campbell, who everybody loved, and I certainly even do today, Jim Campbell tried to trade Kaline and I all winter long.
That's amazing.
Couldn't make the right. Yes, sir. Could not make the right deal. All winter they tried to trade Kaline.
Well, that was lucky that he didn't trade. He would have traded away a pennant, right?
For the ball club, we were lucky, but he was looking for a couple of pitchers and maybe another real good hitter. But and what I later read and found out from one of the guys inside was that the reason why they could not trade they couldn't trade, because somebody said I'd had a sore arm, which I did, by the way. But the thing with Kaline was, who are you going to trade that's as good? Where are you going to find another Kaline? And that's because the Twins wanted us both, and Campbell turned the deal down at the last moment.
Well, that was luck. I've got 3 more people, and then we will close part 1. Mickey Lolich. He was your rival. He was my rival. I wish we could say we were real good friends. We weren't. Mickey. When you are at the big league level and you think you're the #1 guy in the ball club, you have a rival with the other guy who you think may be #1. And Mickey was the reason, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, Mickey was the reason that I got good. Competition improves the product.
I needed the competition. It had more to do than the Yankees and the White Sox and anybody else. It had to do with Lolich. I always wanted to be #1 in the ball club. And his attitude, his lack of a better term, his nastiness from time to time just made me want to get better and better and better. And I used to go out in throwing sessions between starts. Instead of throwing 10 minutes, I throw 35 just to keep throwing the same pitch to get better.
Yeah.
Because anything you do in life, if you do it more often and more often, you get better at it. I don't care what you
Well,
what it is.
tell me if I'm right. I think I remember Lolich won 3 games. You
He
won
sure
2.
did. I won 1 in the
Oh, I
World
thought you
Series.
won
yeah,
2.
I won 1.
Okay.
Yeah, Mickey.
All right.
I won the 6th game, and Lolich won the 7th.
Although
game.
you went into a lot of other things. Mickey went into the donut business.
He
right?
did. He did very, very well.
Update. How's Mickey doing today, or do you know?
Mickey, I think, is a bit ill, but as we all get old, we get a little ill. And but I understand he's okay now. I think his wife Joyce had some serious medical problems, and I think she's now fine. And my wife, of course, is she's got Parkinson's, and she's got inflamed vertebrae packed. And I ask everybody to pray for her. December 1st, we're having a
Great wife,
monster operation.
behind every success, and I met your wife.
You
She's a
did.
classy lady.
She is.
Behind every successful man, there's a successful lady. Right?
She's been my pal for 52 years, and she's having
Through
this
thick and thin.
Yep, she's having an operation December 1st. She can't walk anymore, and this operation is supposed to allow her to at least walk, go from room to room again, and we're praying to God that from that doctor's lips to God's ears that that's going to happen.
Hopefully, I'm going to have you back maybe
Please.
after that.
Be great.
Hopefully, we'll celebrate
Be wonderful.
her.
Because we were just told 3 days ago that we were told she had cancer about
Oh, boy.
3 or 4 weeks ago, and we just had all the tests finalized. We had a big party at 2 nights ago because she was cancer-free.
Oh,
so we've had a pretty good week, no matter what happens the rest of the week.
Mayo Smith. Hardly, now, Mayo Smith to me is the mystery of the 68 Tigers. I was a big fan of the 68 Tigers. I can't tell you a thing, and everybody I talk to knows nothing about Mayo
Absolutely.
Smith. He was like the mystery of all the mysteries of the 68
He was the
Tigers.
best manager I ever played
Really?
for. He knew the game, knew his players. You know, it's one thing to be a good manager and a strategist. It's another thing to know your players and how they should play under your strategy and your plan. Mayo knew it. Mayo knew what kind of a ball club we had. He knew what guys could do in situations. That was his strength. He really did know. He knew what pitcher he could leave in a game. He knew what pitcher he couldn't leave late in the ball game with a 1-run lead or 2-run lead. And keep one thing in mind. I want everybody to think about this.
No one knows anything about this
Nobody
man.
knows anything. But let me tell you something. In '67, we finished second, only because I didn't pitch in September. '68, we win it all. This is Mayo, the manager. '69, we finished second. In 1970, I was suspended for half the year.
That was a frustrating year.
Frustrating year. We finished third. Now think about it. Second, first, second, and third, and he never, ever gets an ounce of credit for anything he did.
Why is that?
He was quiet. He was unassuming. He sipped a little bit, but he was always in a great... I never met a man who never had a bad day when people were around. Now, I don't know if he ever had a bad moment when people weren't around, but Mayo was a class act. And again, I say this in the strongest terms. He was the best manager I ever played for. He understood the game, and the most important part, he understood his players. And I don't know a player, with the exception probably of Lolich for a while, that did not love Mayo Smith.
That's interesting. You know, I suggested to you before you ought to do a book on Mayo Smith.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea.
We're going to end on a high note and just use the phrase, the best is yet to come, and that's what Sinatra often said. I'm a big fan of Sinatra. I'm planning a big event next year, which you're going to be part of. But tell me how you got to know Sinatra. You told me this story before. It's a fascinating story of how Denny McClain got to know Sinatra when you were at Olympia Stadium. Talk a little bit about that and tell us what you remember about your first meeting with Sinatra.
First time I ever saw Sinatra sing, he was having a concert at Olympia. And we were up in the nosebleed. Now, I mean, as you remember that.
It goes straight up, doesn't it?
Straight
You
up.
could fall off,
I mean,
right,
if you
as you-
fall off, and some people had, you fall off of there, you're dead. I mean, there's no chance of you surviving this fall.
It's a straight up, right?
Straight up.
Yeah.
I mean, straight. And we were in one of the last rows, like the third or fourth row from the banister, or whatever the heck it's called. And he found out I was there. And he said...
What year was this? Probably 68, 69?
No, it was 70, it was. It was 69 or 70.
Okay.
And he sent 2 guys up.
He found you were way up there.
Yeah,
Who were you with now?
just friends of mine, that's all.
Okay, all
4 of us. And he found out we were there, and he sent 2 guys up to get us.
Wasn't Jilly Rizzo's son one of them?
Jilly Rizzo was one
Who
of
was
his,
his
was one of
buddy
the
in
guys,
Chicago?
but in New York. And what happened was, come up there, and they looked like two guys from the Traficant family, for God's sakes. I mean, hey, I'm Jilly Rizzo, and I'm here to help you. I said, you're here to help me do what? And he said, well, Mr. Big Frank wants you downstairs, wants you near the stage, wants to introduce you, wants to do all these good things with you. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, who sent you up here? He says, Frank, Mr. Sinatra sent me up here. You better come. I said, I'm coming. So the 4 or 5 of us got up. We went down with him. And, you know, going down those stairs was a
dangerous too,
oh,
right?
man, you make one bad trip and you're going to be in the middle of the stage with Mr. Sinatra, and he's going to be looking down and say, what happened to you? And so anyway, we get down there, and he puts us in the front row, introduces us. It's a great dog and pony show. I mean, I never had so much fun. And then after the show, we spent about 30, 40 minutes in the back while they got his limos ready, and we had to drive. I don't know if I've told you this before, but right after the show, we drove out to a restaurant in northwest Detroit where we used to pick up ribs all the time and take him back to New York. Okay. And then he said, as we were driving in the limo, he says, how about coming back to New York with us? I said, oh, come on, stop it. I said, no. I said, I got to get, Mrs. McClain will kill me. He says, listen, you tell her you're with me, and I'm sure things will be fine. Well, Sinatra, every newspaper in the world was with a different woman every night. Yeah. My wife was going to really accept that idea, right? So I just...
Tell me a little bit, what was his personality? What was he? Was he arrogant? Was he friendly? Humble?
You know what? I was such a Sinatra fan to begin with. His arrogance, I would never even suggest he was arrogant.
He was a fun-loving guy.
That was Frank. He was having fun. He loved doing the dog and pony show. He wanted to show off, but he showed off in his own Frank Sinatra way. He didn't put anybody on. And his language, of course, was a bit crusty. And every other word was a kind of a nasty word. But the bottom line is, he was what he was, and you got what you saw. And if he liked you genuinely, you were his friend for life.
Well, did the charisma exude? I remember you told me
it's unbelievable.
That when he was in a place, the whole place.
When we walked into the airport hangar area, not the hangar, but the area that we had to get on the jet to go back to New York. When we walked into that area, the room stopped. I mean, the room literally stopped. Everybody stopped. Frank Sinatra. And I don't know if I told you this. There were about 30 or 40 people around there, guys trying to get in their planes, leaving in their planes, and other people out there having dinner and what have you. The thing about it was, he signed an autograph for anybody who came up to him. I was so shocked and impressed. I mean, I knew guys in our own club back then that wouldn't stop and sign an autograph for people. And here you got the biggest star, and as far as I was concerned, in America, with the exception, I think, tied with Elvis. And this guy stopped to sign an autograph for everybody. It was unbelievable.
I heard, I just recently went to a restaurant called Giovanni's. I don't know if you've
I've heard of it.
And I met the owner. She's 85 years old. She told me stories about Sinatra, how he sat down, spent time with her, signed autographs to whoever was in and what have you. So Sinatra was a classy guy with the fans.
Class act. Now, you don't want to get on the other side of him either. No. I mean, I saw a couple of examples of guys that got a little peeved one day or once or twice, but you know what? In general, if you just treated him like Frank, you were fine.
And I heard from many people that he was loyal to people for life.
Loved him. Loved him. He never gave up on you.
Well, Denny, I thank you for an absolutely fascinating, riveting interview. I look forward to having you back for part 2. And as Sinatra would say, the best is yet to come.
It is.
Thank you, Denny, for part 2.
Thank you very much.
Part 1, I should say, and we'll look forward to part 2. Thank you for another Fouts Forum. I look forward to seeing you soon for part 2 with the great, the legendary Denny McClain.